Okay, welcome back to Year One Podcast. Now on our fifth episode. So we have a really good one in store this time, and we can't wait to dive in. But first, I'd like to introduce the group of gentlemen we have here. So we have Micah McNeil,
What's
Felipe
up?
Segura, yeah, and Zachary Crilley, all hailing from Washington D.C. for this call, and
Yeah.
myself, Gavin Farnan, up in Boston. So without further delay, let's get into things here. And for this episode, I wanted to start off with a quick poll. So I'll begin the statement with I'll begin the statement and give it a rating from 1 to 10. 10 being you strongly agree with the statement, and then 1 being that you completely disagree with the statement. And while I'm saying this, I do want the listeners, if you could just give it a quick rating and kind of think about what you would say in the situation and come to your own conclusions. But I know we were talking a lot about trust in institutions last episode, and that led us into the topic of independent thought. So this time around, we're going to have that as our broader topic. But I thought a good statement to start off with would be the rise of social media and digital information has significantly improved our ability to think independently. So what do you think? Do you think that it has really improved our ability to think independently or not? And we'll start from there.
It depends, is the answer, in my opinion. If I were to give a numerical ranking, I would say probably 6. I think that it's most likely a net positive. As we've discussed in prior episodes on multiple topics, fraud, trust in institutions, an abundance of information on its face is a positive thing. However, it doesn't always mean that it leads to more thought process and deeper level thinking, higher order thinking on particular topics. I think that trend wise, we've seen unquestionably an exponential growth in the amount of information that's available to us as everyday consumers of information. Yet I would also posit that there is potentially more of a tendency to see things in a black and white manner these days. Also, in saying that, I have no reference point past 23 years ago, but it seems as if a lot of issues are broken down into black and white. You're either for, you're against. Your team, red team, blue team, pro, anti, and in reality, the answer is often the same answer as to this question, which is it's nuanced and it's a gray area. It's not a black and white issue.
This is a tough question. I mean, I want to say if you look at it like just hypothetically, right? Like this would bring more independent thought, right? Which is like because like in social media now, like you have like all these micro like communities, right? Where like everyone like bands together and like hangs out and talks about the same thing. Um, and that's like different from like what used to be there 20, 30, 40 years ago, Walter Cronkite times, like where like there was one or two news anchors that everyone listened to. But I don't know, like it feels like everyone has like very similar opinions when you're in like certain places and stuff. So I don't know. I think having independent thought is hard regardless if you live in like 30 years ago or if you live today. I guess there's just more echo chambers, but I don't think that like more people are independently thinking or less people are independently thinking. I think that's my like hot take. So like I guess I would say like it's a 5, like or yeah, like just in the middle. So yeah.
Yeah, I think sort of following a little bit that same vein, when you initially asked the question, I immediately wanted to say like one. But I think a lot of what Zach and then also Felipe were getting at, it's a lot of perspective, right? Like even like, example, what's going on sort of like with foreign policy now. Like imagine that same situation in 2003. Like there would have been such an echo chamber of information that you didn't get that we have so much access to now. So people are held accountable for the things that they say, and there's sort of an echo chamber of which they can have feedback from. I think the problem that happens though is so many people they read a headline and then they'll sort of go with that, or they'll find something that sort of upholds what they already believe. And I think that's a problem there is that a lot of people, sort of to quote Elon Musk, don't view things from first principle and then work backwards. So they're sort of starting from whatever they see, and that's sort of the problem. I always find it famous, and this is also stolen from Naval, but it's like Latin, and it's nullius in verba. And essentially, what it is take nobody's word for it, which essentially you could say figure it out for yourself. And I think that's something that's just really important for us and sort of for our societies to sort of weed out what we see in a headline or what we see in like sort of just try to figure it out for ourselves and then create our opinions from that. I think a lot of the problem that we run into today is that people, if you fit too neatly in a box, if you lean one side, you lean to another side, I don't essentially know if you're a free thinker. And I think that's sort of what we have to chase is sort of being a free thinker and just thought and how we perceive things. And I think that's lacking. So to answer the actual question, I don't know, right? Again, it's perspective. But I think if I just had to answer it for what it is, just for argument's sake, I'd probably say, a seven to an eight, because I think the information's actually there. It's just how we go about perceiving the information. We live in the internet age where, you could call it the Library of Alexandria if you wanted to, but it's important to, actually create and then learn from what you actually believe. That made no sense, that last bit, but I tried to make something out of it.
And a whole nother layer of it is the social element too.
I do think it is in. Go ahead.
The social element in addition to the access to information, right? If I see Micah, Gavin, Felipe posting a similar opinion, oh, we're team pro X concept, I'm then more likely to have that reinforced in my mind. And we've seen this in mass in recent years with different issues. And the use of social media to provide a microphone for these issues where it's oh my gosh, everybody that I know, people that I know and love and trust are on this side of this topic. And I think that that's a real strong point in the antithesis of free thought, because then it becomes, then you kind of get tagged into the primal thought processes of, oh, will I be outcast from the group if I publicly take an alternative stance? And that is a real big factor that should be factored into this conversation. In addition to the access to the information, is the social pressures added on top of the access to information.
And like to your point, Zach, like that's why I'm like I said earlier, like I don't think more people are thinking freely than before, right? Like and this kind of like for me like points to that like mimetic desire or whatever that we had talked about a few weeks ago, which is like you're trying to copy other people, right? And like you associate yourself with certain things, right? And like I mean, a lot of like people watch only Fox News and then like literally reverberate like or regurgitate what like Sean Hannity said the night before. And it's the same thing with like CNN or MSNBC. And like before that, there were probably newspapers, right? Like the socialist newspaper or like the nationalist newspaper that people would just read that one and that's what they associated with. So yeah, I mean, it's like I think though it's easier now to be a free thinker than ever before, I would say. And like you have more tools, the internet to become something like that. But yeah, I don't think that like I think it's like a very difficult like virtue almost to have. Yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like our ability to be a free thinker due to the abundance of information is definitely increased, but the I guess the difficulty has basically stayed constant because it's more so a moral and societal value than just because the information's there, you're going to become more independent. Do you think that is the case? Do you think that since there's more information, more people are likely going to kind of break out into different groups of thought, or you think that it's more societal and it's just human nature and it's very difficult to change someone to become a free thinker and think on their own?
I can jump in real quick. I think it's quite difficult because what you have right now is you have the smartest individuals in the world, like quite literally, like the smartest groups of people in the world, right? The engineers, right? The people who, write the algorithms for these companies. So what you have, to Felipe's point, is that you have, you go on X, you go on Instagram, you go on Facebook, you have groups like Cambridge Analytica, right? The company that was, really famous for the whole, 2016 election. But you have these people that literally control the algorithms on how we think, right? So if you have information that just upholds what you already believe, and that's constantly just put into your feed consistently, you're going to be a little bit polarized to that group or that community that sort of believes what, you sort of think already. So it's hard to resist that in anything. And to, I think to Zach and Felipe's point, it also becomes a lot of virtue signaling where it's like you don't really have much, skin in the game, but because your neighbor said something and you're like, okay, I sort of align with my neighbor, you're also going to agree with that. And that's a hard thing to resist. I don't really know where you go with it.
And like on top of that, I think it's tough too, because now everyone has an opinion on everything. And like sometimes, I don't know, like how you guys feel, right? Like we're all trying to like get off the ground, like either business ideas or networking or like doing whatever task we have in front of us. And then it's like, maybe I don't have an opinion on the war somewhere over there or like this social issue. And you kind of like have to have one though, like you know what I mean? Like when you talk to like other people. So I think that idea of like someone asking you something, you being like, I really don't know enough, just like doesn't exist as much anymore. Maybe like, again, I'm like you, Zach, like I don't know what it was like 20, 23, 24 years ago. So I can't really say, but it feels weird. Like you have to have an opinion on everything.
And
I think go ahead, Zach, sorry.
I was going to say, there's two things that I want to say. One is overall asking the question of what is true independent thought, right? Because every piece of information that we read has some bias in the way it's written. Unless we go off into the woods Thoreau style and live completely on our own and develop our own entirely unique thoughts, it's very difficult to really parse out, is this something that I entirely 100% believe independently, or has this been influenced by some factors in my background, nature, nurture, what have you? That's more so of a question. But Felipe, on your point about being forced to take a side, that's something that I fundamentally reject, is the notion of silence is violence and the forcing of people to take a side and the naming and shaming of those that don't on social media. I think that it's entirely appropriate for somebody to say what you just said, which is, I don't have all the details of this. I don't have a dog in this fight necessarily, and I don't know. It takes a strong man to say that.
Yeah, I think that was the key right there. That I think the smartest thing, and I think like even for me personally, is something that I've been trying to grow at, is not have an opinion on everything. Like there's no way you can constantly know everything that's going on. Our brains are too overstimulated with a million things going on every single day. So I think to both of your points, the smartest thing that what you finished with Zach and then what you also finished with Felipe is the best thing that you can just say is, I don't know. Right. And I think by doing that, you give yourself back some mental health and you make yourself feel better for just having the self awareness. Like, how the hell am I supposed to know? Right. To both of your points, I think that's sort of the difficulty.
And I
Yeah,
think it boosts your credibility as well, right? Because we're 23, 24, 25-year-old young adults. There's
Yeah.
no way that we can know the nuances of all these complex issues.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And one thing that to me is like, I guess maybe this has to do with social media as well, is I think like the news and like the way you receive news has become very like entertainment like centric in a way. Like it's like addicting to listen to like certain political newscasters talk about the issue, and then you're like, okay, like I can't wait till tomorrow to listen to them again. And like and like to me, like where that shows is like everyone is like hating right now on the way that the debates are done for presidential debates, right? Because like it's this archaic 50-year-old way of doing it, and like you have commercials in between, everyone gets like 2 minutes to talk. But I think people are only like complaining about it now is because like everything else and the way that they consume information is so like tailor made for them to be like addicted to it, that this like archaic way of doing like debates is just like foreign to people, right? And so like yeah, I mean it does like really draw you in, and like I guess sometimes politics and like thinking about politics and having opinions on certain things is almost like a luxury hobby at times, if it's not, or I don't know how you guys feel like at times, like sometimes, and like I 100% believe you should know what's going on in like Syria or something like that, but that does detract in a way if you're thinking about like I want to start a business in America, right? At times, or I don't know. How do you guys feel?
I have two comments and then I also have a question. I actually, for my birthday this past year, I went to Sean Hannity. RFK was there, and RFK was talking. That's the only reason why. And literally, Sean is throwing footballs in the crowd. Like when you say entertainment, like it was actually entertainment. It was the funniest, but such a great event at the same time. I didn't go there for Hannity, obviously. I went there for RFK, but it was great. And then, to your point, and then I want to ask a question off of it. I wanted to comment on it. To me, because I was someone who, studied international politics, this is, something I really cared about. And to be at Georgetown, what I found is that it's so much noise that it destroys your mental health by paying too much attention to politics. It hurts my head, the shit that I see every single day. And I think the smart money, and this leads into my question, what do sort of you guys think? Do you think, our generation is starting to wake up to that, to the sort of this show business, we have characters like Vivek, RFK, who sort of speak out on these things? Or do you think this is something that's becoming something that we're overly stressed upon when you have like things like, such as like ideologies, such as like just, far left or far right ideology? I'm not going to get into the specific ones. Do you think the sharp money starting to wake up to it, or are we still stuck in it? And then where does it go?
Yeah, I definitely think that we're beginning to wake up from that. And especially for myself, I am definitely on the side of like if it's not one of your top goals or doesn't help you achieve one of your top goals, then why are you paying attention to it? I think
Mm.
it's what Warren Buffett said. He said, write down 15 goals and then look at the top three and cross out all the others. And if you're looking at those top three, you only have a certain amount of time in the day. And for me, I just think that if I'm on social media, if I'm getting worked up about all of these different issues, that's taking up so much time and attention away from my top three priorities. And if those are the things that I want to achieve now, like I gotta make a sacrifice somewhere.
And I think that we're seeing that disillusionment in a sense where our generation has many great aspects and certainly aspects that we can strengthen. One of the great aspects, in my opinion, is the ability to detect truthfulness and deceit. And I think that we're seeing that become stronger and stronger. And maybe it is due to the vast amounts of information that we've been able to process from a young age, some of it truthful, some of it deceitful. But in the end, in my opinion, truth will win out. And it's a true skill to be able to see those kernels of truth, see the light through the darkness, hear the signal through the noise. And to your point, Felipe and Micah, there's a lot of noise. And frankly, I don't know if it's 100% my responsibility to know what's going on in Syria or Yemen. I don't. I agree with Gavin that what's most important is how I can move the needle in my life tomorrow. Maybe some people will think that that's a selfish opinion. Maybe some people will say it's a luxury to be able to negate certain things. Yeah, I can see that logic, frankly, but that's the situation that I'm in. There's certain things that are going to be able to move the needle in my life and certain things that aren't. And it's my responsibility to take the things that are within my control and do the best that I can at them and leave everything else out. And maybe that's callous. Maybe that's rude or politically incorrect. But frankly, that's the situation that's in front of us. And that's the side that I have to be on. Am I 100% perfect at doing that? Can I ignore all the noise all the time? Definitely not. But that's the North Star that I strive for.
So on that, like, what do you guys read, or like, how do you consume information? Like, I personally, like, subscribe to like 4 or 5 different Substacks. So like, you get like a weekly newsletter of like 5 people that you're like, whoa, these people are like really smart. Like, I really value their opinion and I'm really interested in this space. Like, yeah, how are you guys going about that?
Well, I think one, I just try to always start from sort of first principle and just literally, I think everything. So like, I always like enjoyed this what Obama did with his cabinet, but he had people within his cabinet that were on both sides of the spectrum. I always like that because you get to hear sort of the food of thought from people that usually differ. So at least on like Twitter, right? I'll follow the extreme like you remember that one guy from the alt-right guy, like Richard Spencer from like a couple of years ago? Like I'll follow him,
Oh, boy.
right? Like obviously I don't agree with anything this motherfucker has to say, but I want to see what he has to say, and there's a lot of pundits like that on both sides of the spectrum. So I try to get, I try to, at least from the feedback loop, I try to, hear both of these sides and then feed out the ones that are a little too extreme. I end up blocking them on Twitter, but going from there. So and then only reading things like, obviously, like you guys know, I love Nassim Taleb. Like that's just my like favorite person in the world. I've read all of his books. Like so people like that, individuals like that, the all-in guys, people who have actual skin in the game but don't have a bias to them. Those are the people that I just try to fend myself for, and it's not easy. But like if I see an op-ed in the Washington Post, I'm gonna go read whatever it says in like the New York Times or like the opposite, and then try to converge on my opinion from there. With everything too.
Yeah, what I'm learning is that, I mean, it takes a lot of time to become really convicted about a certain topic. And for that to happen, I think that short form like tweets or little pieces of content, it's very difficult to create a conviction from that. So that's why I just value reading like a book that I'm interested on a topic about, and getting one side of that story and whatever the author thinks and whatever side they take. I try to just read read a book on that topic. And that's really how I see the best way of getting my kind of convictions. But I don't know, like what do you guys think about short form content? Like how do you kind of interact with it and get value from it?
Yeah, but I'm going to push back on that. I think that it can be a very quick process to become convicted or to have conviction on a topic. I think it's a much longer process to be well informed about something. But I think that having conviction and being well informed are oftentimes divorced from each other, because the more that you learn, the more you recognize the nuances of issues.
Yeah, but at the same time, if you create a conviction about something and you're not well informed and you're screaming that from the rooftops, then what are you? If you're just kind
And
of leading people astray.
that's what we're getting at here, is the lack of independent thought, is the people that see a video of a horrendous act, no matter if it's an aggression of a international war, something that's happening in the city, whatever, and saying, oh my gosh, look at this is bad. That means the other side must be evil, this side must be great. That's my conviction on this opinion. Case closed. Here's my argument. I'm going to repost everything that supports this argument. If you disagree, you're a demon and should be canceled. And I think that that's a real problem that we're getting at here. I wish that people thought in the way that it sounds like you do, where it takes you a long time to build up to that point of conviction. But I think that point of conviction has been lowered significantly.
And rightfully so. I think you make a good point with that. I think it's like Aristotle. It's like the more you know, the more you realize you know nothing. So like understanding that there is so much nuance and context to a lot of these things we talk about, a lot of these things we argue about, whether it be foreign, whether it be domestic, whether it be whatever topic you want to make. There's a lot of nuance to these conversations. I think that's where we have to sort of go as a society if we want to, make the strides that we want. But I think that's sort of the issue. We'd love to hear your guys' thoughts.
Yeah, Gab, well, on your point about like, what do you think about short-term medium? And sorry, Mike, if I'm like running away, but like, I think this is one thing that I'm a big like fan of, like Instagram Reels, TikTok, Twitter, Substack, this idea that like, you don't have to write a book. And like, I read a lot, like, but like this idea that like, if you are someone who is like committed to being a free thinker and has the discipline to like stay away from like all the different political thinkers who are like trying to reel you in on every topic of the day, and you're like, okay, I want to be like an expert in hats for my like hat business or whatever it might be, like you can find the top 5 people in an industry. And like, I think this is only becoming more and more true. And like in these micro sectors, and then literally consume all their content really quickly, because you have like now short form content, and you can take the top 5, top 6, take it all together. And because I think like you're just like a very unique human being, every person's unique, like you can come up with your own idea once you become an expert in a certain industry. So like, this is part of like why I think like it's easier in some ways, if you're really disciplined, to be like an incredibly like thoughtful free thinker in a way that was never done before in a much shorter period. But yeah.
Yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from, but I just think like getting to that point of being an expert in something would be difficult from short form content. I mean, it depends on the creator and the person putting it out there, but do you see a lot of people that are creating very technical and content around what subjects you're interested in and learning deeply about it
So I
from
think
those creators?
yeah, so you're right on two fronts, and I'll admit it. Like, I was listening to Mark Manson, who wrote the Art of Not Giving a Fuck book, and he was like, early days internet, he was writing like 10 different websites, one on like, he was a so-called expert in how to make your teeth like the whitest white possible, and like he knew nothing about how to make your teeth white or anything like that, right? So like, there definitely are frauds, but like, I definitely see more and more creators around like drop shipping, or even something like coding. Like, you start to see that like people are on YouTube posting videos, and I think like it's only going to go in that direction. That's what I personally think to that.
Yeah, I think just quickly. I think that's more the problem. I think so many people are looking for shortcuts. I don't think anything worth actually doing, anything that you actually get true benefit from, comes in short-term shortcuts. I think like Warren Buffett has that story where he's like, you know, a kid or ask him like, how do I get to become you? And he's like, read these financial statements and just read 150 of them every day, because that's what Warren Buffett did. But that's not the answer that the kid was looking for. He wants some short form, just quick answer of how I can get there. And that's just not the reality of anything. So I kind of push back on the idea of these short form ways of, going about something or getting what we want, like something like job shipping or something like that, because the kid's going to watch that video and never do it.
But I hear what you're saying, but at the same time, if that's what the trends are going towards, and that's what the appetite is for, I really don't know how one could. It would take an act of God to reverse the attention spans of our generations. How is that going to happen? I'm not sure. But where I do see some, again, nuance and divergence of like absolute thought here is the popularity of long form media as well, long form podcasts. And I know in my personal information diet, it's a mixture of short form and long form. I think that there's a place for both. I think that previously short form wasn't available in mass. That's the change that we're seeing. But I really do think that there's a place for both in a person's information diet.
Yeah, that's a good point. With how we process information and how we maybe new forms of learning or new forms of listening or like a short form podcast on how we like learn. Yeah, but in anything like actually worth doing, like actually making money, I don't think anything, there's no shortcut to that.
Yeah.
There's no easy blueprint to that.
You wouldn't want a doctor performing surgery on you that read one Twitter thread about how to perform the surgery. But I think that there can be different levels of it. Like one level is exposure, and then maybe diving in deeper, and then the deepest level is mastery. I hope that people understand that they're not going to reach mastery from short form content one or two times. But I think in terms of exposure, it can be a great tool.
Yeah, I could be. I mean, I don't know. Like, for example, started listening to the All In Pod mainly because I saw them on TikTok. That's like how I started. Like, they would snip up, like little clips about like certain things, and the way I think of it sometimes it's like, you want to know about the issue in Israel, like, well, the All In like interviewed Jared Kushner, like you can short form cut it, post it up, and then you're like, okay, I don't want to listen to the whole thing, I want to listen to this excerpt. It takes you right there. I don't know, that's like there's definitely use in it. I guess the question is how useful is it, as useful as I think or not. Yeah.
I mean, I think that we're saying the same thing here, which is there's different levels to it. At the one end of the spectrum is seeing a TikTok video, reading a tweet. At the other side of the spectrum is going to a university and getting a PhD, right? And the question is, different topics, you're going to need different levels. Another question is how much of it should be put into practice, and how much can you learn from reading, from watching videos, and how much has to be experienced. I think that also depends on the subject. You wouldn't want a doctor that goes immediately and starts just practicing, right? But at the same time, you wouldn't want an entrepreneur that has a PhD in entrepreneurship but has never actually done a business venture in their life. So that's an interesting conversation that we can maybe roll into next week.
I think that's next week's conversation right there. Yeah.
I agree.
All right. Well, before we end, I have to give a shout out. My brother Patrick had a baby, Henry Blackwell Crilley, last week, which made me an uncle. Hey, so shout out.
Congratulations.
That's dope.
Thank you. Great. Well, we'll wrap here and we'll see everybody next week.
All right, fellas.
Peace.